Welcome to the Vibrant Life Summit, where we are having rich conversations exploring how to achieve and maintain optimal health, thus creating and living a vibrant life, which is so especially relevant during this unprecedented holiday season. I'm so thrilled to welcome our guest, Patti Conklin, here today, and I'd like to tell you a little bit about her. Patti was born with a unique ability to see how the vibration of words and emotions affect the physical body. She began to understand that manipulating the vibration of the particles that make up the body could release stored emotion and facilitate healing. The Conklin method of cellular cleansing was born. Wanting to share this valuable knowledge, Patti began teaching others how to shift their perception and thus prevent illness from occurring. She quickly became a frequent keynote speaker, and soon a curriculum to learn the Conklin method of cellular cleansing was in demand. She developed the Certified Associates of Cellular Cleansing Training Manual, which opened the doorway to a select few students who now offer cellular cleansing in their own private practices around the globe. Patti hosts the podcast Healing Within Radio and the program Healing Within, an adventure inside streaming on binge networks. Welcome, Patti.
Thank you so much for having me on. I'm just delighted to be here.
I'm so glad you could be here. So you have many titles. You have had many titles, from medical intuitive to vibrational meditator, TV and radio host, mother, student, and more. What drives you in your work, and what is your life purpose or mission?
Oh, big question. I think for me, it's been a gift since childhood. It's something that I was born with in terms of being able to see vibration. And when I say vibration, think of it as watching the television and the cable goes out and you get particles. You get the snow on the TV. That's kind of my world. And I didn't realize I was different until I was in my mid-20s. I thought everybody saw the world that way. So it came as a shock to me when I found out that people actually saw physical items. For me, it was particles, and if it was something that I had never seen before, I had to feel it like a blind person, and that would give it shape and give me form, and then I'd be able to go ahead and figure out what it was. So, for me, I had a visitation, what I call a visitation, at 7 years old, and was told three things: that 38 to 42 would be my greatest growth years, that 42 to 62 would be my greatest contribution to humanity, and that the purpose of my walk was to teach people to become insubstantial without transitioning. And even though I was precocious as a 7-year-old, I didn't know what that meant. And as life has gone on, and I realize that I see the words inside the body or see a disease inside the body ahead of, traditional medicine, I think what it really is how do I help people go out of judgment without having to die to do it? My sons kind of laugh and go, you may just have been asked to wash the windows, and, you haven't washed a window yet, so maybe you need to get that done. But for me, it was being of service. I realized by my mid-20s that I had been given a specific gift, and that was to see disease in the body. And so, at 63, I've gone beyond the 62. I was kind of waiting for things to happen then, but at 63, it's really about continuing to help people understand why disease began in their body. What was their emotional belief that created the disease to begin with? So it's really been a continuation of that service. And, so medical intuitive was the term 25 years ago when I started that kind of fit. In reality, my staff and I kind of laugh that I'm more of a vibrational manipulator. It just doesn't look good on a business card. So we use vibrational mediator. But vibration for me is all there is.
Beautiful. I really, I find it so special that people with your gift are here and able to help us. And, it's finally become more outspoken, if you will. It's more in the norm. And it's just remarkable.
It really has. And I think that, even in Western medicine, a doctor may call me and go, I think this is just foolish. I think it's stupid. But a colleague of mine had a patient that you worked with and it worked. And doesn't know why it worked, but it worked. So I'm willing to give you a shot. And then usually a month later, they'll call back and go, how did you do that? How did you know? So it's really become much more open. It's always been open in Europe and other areas of the world, but finally the United States is kind of getting together with it.
Can you explain how our bodies make truth of the words we speak and how that
Oh,
us?
yeah. Every word you speak goes into your body, every single one. And so, you could be working out like crazy to lose weight and do different things. And then all of a sudden, you stand in front of the mirror and you go, gosh, I'm fat. And your body goes, I can do that. I mean, it doesn't have discernment capabilities. And so, whatever you say, your body makes good of. And so, even those, it doesn't say, oh, she doesn't really mean that. So, I'm not gonna have her gain weight or not lose weight or whatever. The body will take it as truth. And so what happens is so much of the time when we're not feeling well, that we we'll go to the doctor and the doctor will tell us everything that could be wrong. And they need to, because if they don't, they're going to get sued, right? For so many people's mindset. And so the thing you fear the most is what you begin researching. And the body goes, oh, this, but okay. So, it's like if a client calls me and says, I found a lump this morning in my breast. Do I have cancer? My response will be, do you want to have cancer? Because I know the power of my words and I know the power of people's belief. And I say, if I say, oh my gosh, yeah, you know what? There's a little bit of a dark mass down there. I wonder if you do. If they didn't have cancer when they called, they'll have cancer by the time they hang up. And so it's imperative that we look at how we speak, how we vocalize, what words we use. We can say anything we need to say, even if it's a not so great situation, but we can use positive words. Your spouse or partner asks you in the morning when you get up, how do you feel this morning? And if you say, oh my gosh, the chemo I had yesterday or my leg that I hurt yesterday, it hurts so bad and I just feel miserable, your body's response is going to say, okay, well, let's be miserable then. But if you say, you know what, in 10 minutes, I'm going to feel terrific, you're validating that you don't feel terrific in the moment, but you're also giving your body the cue that you're going to feel better. So as a child, when you first experienced an emotion, say your first temper tantrum when you were 2, and let's say your lungs were weak at that time in your life, then typically the temper tantrum, the frustration or whatever, is going to go into the lungs. There's been a lot of books written throughout the years about, this emotion stores in this part of the body and so on and so forth. I don't find that to be true. Generically, it's there, but typically the weakest part of your body, when you first experience a new emotion, that's where the emotion goes, into that part of the body.
And so you mentioned, cancer and the significance of youth. Is there other diseases that you've worked with that you can use to highlight how the words get stored and what
Uh-huh.
tells us about disease and healing?
Everything and anything. I mean, I don't think that there's a disease yet that's been labeled that I haven't worked with. We've been doing this for 25 years now, and tens of thousands of people. So, you get a lot of different varieties of disease. But let's talk about a woman who was diagnosed with MS,
Mm.
and she came into my office in a scooter. And, she said, I have MS, and her body's just saying, no, I don't. It's just the words written across her body. No, I don't. And so I trust the body. I want to hear what people say to me, but I trust the body. And I said, what took place when you started having symptoms? And she said, well, I was writing a screenplay about my life growing up in the Catholic schools and how mean the nuns were and just how much I hated it. And I'm like, really? And I'm like, okay. And I said, so what symptoms did you have first? And she said, I had problems with my hands. And I said, were you athletic as a child? And she said, yeah. And I said, do you think maybe when you fell at any time, you may have gotten a lesion somewhere in your brain, from falls? And she's like, oh, I'm sure. I'm like, okay. So you had this issue with your hands. So you went to the doctor and he gave you all of the different things that it possibly could be. And what scared you the most? And she said, MS. I said, okay. So he did blood work and your blood work came back beautiful. And he said, well, let's do a brain scan because, we need to see if it's MS. And so she went and had a brain scan. And I said, just stop right there. You had 5 lesions in your brain. And she's like, that's exactly how many I had. And I said, you understand that when you started writing about your growing up within the Catholic schools and what you experienced, that your hatred grew so much that it's not the lesions in your brain. You actually have a blockage at T7 and it's stopping the neurological flow in your body. You don't have MS. Why don't you stand up out of the scooter? And she's like, I can't. And I'm like, well, when was the last time you tried? And so, her muscles were soft, but she was able to stand and understand that it wasn't. I always say it's kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. You put in enough emotion in one area so that you finally develop a disease. And another woman, and she was fascinating. She had muscular dystrophy, and she had been diagnosed when she was 6. And she's a well-known hypnotherapist, speaks at a lot of conferences and so forth, but she went into a wheelchair at 32. And so everybody would see her at the conferences in her scooter and zipping all over the place. And I think maybe 6, 7 years went by, and she finally looked at me and she said, you've never offered to help me. I'm like, well, you've never asked for help. So, if you're not going to ask me for help, it's not up to me to ask, if you want help. And she said, well, I'd like to do a cellular cleansing. And I said, okay. And she flew to Atlanta and got a hotel room. And we started cleaning out the first 4 or 5 years of her life. Her parents were atheists, and she had married a Christian man. And so the conflict of parents telling her that, Christians weren't good people, and then marrying a Christian and loving him and having this back and forth put her in the wheelchair. By the time I returned the next morning to finish up the cellular, to finish up cleaning out the years of her life, she met me at the door.
God.
And she walked down the hallway. She said, do you want a soda? I'm like, sure. So she walked down the hallway, got me a soda, and came back. We finished up that day. She pushed her scooter through the Atlanta airport, got home to Virginia, and for the first time ever, walked up her front steps and rang the doorbell. And, she didn't tell anyone. So the next conference we were both at, about 2 months later, She's standing there registering, and everybody's kind of looking at her like, what's different? What's different? And then they realized she wasn't in her scooter. Hers was pure judgment. She had been taught judgment. She had retained judgment. And once she let go of her judgment, she let go of the symptoms of muscular dystrophy that had been diagnosed when she was 6. It's amazing what the body will do. And she's a semi-professional ballroom dancer now. I mean, she's always wanted to dance, and she's just twirling all over. And even her parents, she didn't tell her parents that she was walking. And I mean, she was walking immediately. And her parents came to visit, and they came in the door, and she used to have the chair lifts that would go up the stairs and so forth. And she said, "Do you want some water?" And they said, "Sure." And she ran downstairs, and she came running back upstairs, and then it finally hit them that she wasn't using her scooter and that she wasn't using her devices. But she was diagnosed at 6. So that's a long time to have that belief. And there's been a couple of times, when she'll start feeling her legs being weak, and she'll go, "What am I in judgment about?" And she became one of my certified associates. She actually works with people with cellular cleansing, because it was so profound for her, and it really is for a lot of people. We don't understand how much those beliefs or those resentments, the body keeps them. And one of the things that I always look at is the fact that most disease reoccurs within 5 years. If we're looking at cancers and so on and so forth, will reoccur within 5 years. The reason they reoccur is they didn't get the emotion out. Psychologically, you could understand, and change behavior and so forth, but the emotion wasn't taken out of the cells. And so as soon as you start that little bit of behavior, then the symptoms come back, and you start a whole nother round of disease process.
Absolutely amazing.
It's an interesting process to watch.
You were diagnosed with both forms of lupus many years ago, from which you were able to heal yourself. How did you do that, and how did that impact your healing work, Patti?
Yeah, I was 24 when I was first diagnosed, and actually, I think I was 25. I just had my second child, and just started all the symptoms. But I had both. I had external and internal. So I had major kidney issues, had a couple of heart attacks, severe neurological problems, and it was critical for 3 years. And I was in rough shape as a single mom, with 2 little boys, and attempting to make it through each day in such incredible pain, to the point where if the neurological would hit, the nerve endings would get so raw that I would literally stand in the middle of the room for 36 hours, up to 36 hours, naked, standing in the middle of the room, because anything to touch me was just worse than death. I just couldn't bear it. And it was just an awful time period. And I had another visitation, and I was shown how to move color. So I immediately started moving color through my body, and nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. And I'm like, why would you show me something that isn't going to work? And then I started thinking about it, and I thought, why did you develop lupus? What was it that's holding you back? And I realized it was self-worth, that I had doubled up my junior and senior year of high school, and I graduated early. And in my mind, I graduated early, and so therefore I didn't have a legitimate high school diploma because I graduated early. And I had been working in PhD positions my entire life, and I didn't know why, other than the fact that I could do the job. And so here I was working with other PhDs, and I had my high school diploma, which didn't mean anything to me because I graduated early. So it was all about self-worth. So I said, what color do I need to remove my lack of self-worth, 90% of my lack of self-worth from my body. And the first color that came through was black. And I brought it in just the way I'd been shown, through the bottom of my feet, straight up my body and out my mouth. And the colors started changing. And then I said, what color do I need to increase my self-worth by 80%? And did the whole process again. And I did it every day for a year. And we have tested me every year since then, and no signs of lupus. But I had to find the emotional core. That was critical, was to find out what it was. And so, people will come to me and say, well, I know what it is. I got mad at my parents when I was 6, and, I did this and this and this. And the body will go, no, wasn't that at all. And so, it's really understanding what it is that's taking place. So if people do color works, they do, any kind of tone work, and they're not starting to feel a little bit better, they probably don't have the core emotion. But that was really huge for me, to be so critically ill for 3 years. And the doctor saying, you're not going to live much longer than another 4 or 5 years, because it's just ravaging your body. And having both forms as a Caucasian woman was very unusual. And I think it was just father, just giving me the heads up of how to do color works, how to teach people to do color works, and to make that happen as part of my life path as I moved on through life. When I hit 38, and I was asked to start my work.
Mhm, mhm. And your story is unique to you, and also some of the people who do similar work.
Mhm.
They all have a story that, to me, is like initiation to where
Absolutely. Yeah.
it becomes so real and so embodied
Yeah.
that the power increases significantly.
It really does. It really does. I think that you can't teach what you don't know.
Mhm.
And even though we're forever learning, I think you have to have that kind of base understanding of what it means, and to be so critical. I think that if I had just had mild symptoms, that I probably wouldn't have paid much attention. But I had been divorced by then and had little munchkins, and it was critical for me to live. And worthiness was not something, because you're doing a PhD job, so you think that worthiness would not be an issue. But when I really sat with myself, it was like, no, I'm an overachiever. Why am I an overachiever? I'm an overachiever because I feel less than. Yeah.
Fascinating, and it, for me, relates often to that notion of scarcity, that there's not enough of me to go around.
Right. Right. Yeah, I think that my challenge through life had been realizing that I would always have enough energy to do my work. And so I became a workaholic. And so for me, it was learning how to set boundaries, going, yeah, you can take this on, but do you need to take this on right now? And, and having a blessing of my sons just saying, if you're gone Christmas, Thanksgiving, if you're somewhere in the world teaching, that's fine, but you need to be home Mother's Day. That is the one day we will not accept you being gone. And so they kind of put the brakes on things for me, and really reinforce the need for me to be around for them.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
I can see why you must have a full calendar. There's such a need for exactly the work you do, such a deep need for it.
There really is. And I think that if people understood that a cellular cleansing, what I love about cellular when I created it, because color works, which is what I use to heal myself from the lupus, took a year. Cellular cleansing will get 50 to 70% of all your gunk out in a 24, 48-hour period. And so it's understanding that you don't have to remember your childhood. In fact, I don't want you to remember your childhood. I don't want you to think about the bad things that happened in your life. I want you to go to a segment of your life, every year of your life, walk into a dirty room and clean it up. You and your angels, or, whatever animals, whatever you want to take in the room with you, and just touch things, clean it up, and then create something magnificent. And what you're literally doing is taking the cells from that year and you're cleaning out all of the emotions in it, and you're putting something spectacular back into those cells. Those cells lower it back down into the body, and then you go into the next year. Because, so much of our life, those early emotions that we start, or what we listen to from our parents, or, grown-ups around us, is stored in there. And we have no clue that they're in there. And so people will say, I don't remember what happened in my early life. And I'm like, I don't want you to remember. You should be laying there having an awesome time. You should be there just enjoying yourself. The harder it is on me, then the better you're doing. And so it's kind of this switchback. They're like, well, I'm just having a great time. I'm like, you need to have a great time. And so it's a very simple process for them. For me, it's manipulating the frequencies, the vibration, every moment that they're going through the process. And it's really kind of just a way to keep their mind busy as I'm working with their body.
I'm completely enthralled with what you're saying. Completely. I teach yoga, as I think you know, and
Uh-huh.
I've injured my shoulders like 4 different times, rotator cuff injuries in that complex. And the last
Yes.
time I injured my shoulder, it was I injured my long tendon nerve from some physical activity where I was, using my ego to show that I could use this crowbar to dig up dandelions. Injured it. And so many people said to me, you've got to go to the doctor, and you have to, you're probably going to need surgery, because I literally couldn't lift my arm. And I said, no, in every injury, which is what I believe, there's a gift. There's
Yes,
something my body's trying to tell me.
that's right.
A year and a half later, it's healed.
Yep,
It's healed. Now,
it's healed.
had I come for cellular cleansing, it might have been a little quicker, or I might have been able to prevent it had I come.
Right. You would have understood it. And I think that that's what's really important, is understanding why we're creating what we're creating. Really going deep inside of ourselves and saying, what is it that created this, and really moving out of ego. Journaling is a great way to to sit and look at that, and look at what takes place. But I think that, I remember years ago, I was doing a keynote in Maui, and I was flying over, and we were just getting close to Maui, and we hit horrific turbulence in my top 3. I mean, I'm close to 3 million miles on flying around the world and working. But we hit such severe turbulence, and the captain came on and he said, everybody tighten up your seatbelts. I mean, we're fine. We're going to be okay, but I need you to be secure. And so I was sitting and I tightened up my seatbelt, and I heard this and I had cracked my right hip. And the guy next to me was just like, what was that noise? And I'm like, I think I just fractured my hip tightening up my seatbelt, between the tightening up and, the turbulence. And so getting off the plane, I had to have help getting off the plane. And I was doing a series of lectures at Unity churches on the different islands. And so I had a cane, and I was, drinking some silica to kind of help my body and talk to my hip. And it was painful. And I got back home, and I did go to the doctor, and the doctor said, you know what? You're going to need a hip replacement. And I said, you know what? Give me a year. And if I don't have it fixed within a year, then I'll talk to you about it. And within a year, I could go into the lotus position. I could do everything, and started out with just I couldn't bend my leg. I couldn't rotate my hip at all. But within a year, I could go into the lotus position and everything was back to normal. So, I think that, again, that was ego of just, no, I'm just going to tighten this up, and I just crunched at the time, I guess we were doing a drop or a raise. So I think that people, for so many different ailments, the most important thing is to not go into fear,
Mhm.
because once you go into fear, then you're really uh, you're creating an essence that there's something wrong. And if you remember, it's just particles. It's just particles that are vibrating. And if you look at fear as, instead of false evidence appearing real, look at it as forgetting every available resource. And that resources is what's inside of yourself. It's just, be sane, be realistic, be whatever. But understand that it's forgetting every available resource. And the resources is within us.
Mhm.
I can facilitate. I'm not a healer. I can facilitate. I can help you understand what the emotion is. I can guide you through a process, but the work is yours, not mine.
Mhm. Mhm. So powerful. Someone close to me, very close to me, died recently of liver cancer.
Mhm.
And I think that in one of my teachings, it was the excuse me, emotion attached to it was um, anger.
Uh-huh.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. However, um, your work has such profound impact on not just the person, all the people that that person is loved by.
Yes. Yes.
Just
You
really
know.
ripples out. And the other thing I wanted to say is your connection with the particles and I'm anticipating the DNA
Uh-huh.
is super exciting and also gaining so much validity so quickly that
Yes.
can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think that we can look at two things. When people have a belief in a past life, there's three different things that go on in a past life, or three different ways that I think we kind of mainstream that people think we manifest it. Whether we actually, the soul goes into a new form, another body, or whether Edgar Casey's of the universal mind, and your soul goes up into this big cluster of souls, and that's why a million women think they were Cleopatra's, because they vibrated the frequency of that one memory, and so then therefore they take it as their own. Science has really come to a point where they're beginning to understand that it's our ancestral memory that gets stored in our DNA. And so when we're having a deja vu, or we're having a past life regression, um, chances are good that you're having an experience of your ancestral DNA.
Mhm.
Particles are fascinating because you get something that's a little bit more dense, something that's a little lighter. I mean, I can't tell you. I really was blessed with wonderful sons. I was given sons who understood that their mother could not cope in everyday life. When they were 6 and 7, they sat me down and they said, we're beginning to understand, like, that you're not like other mothers. And I'm like, okay. And oldest son, Dan, said, I don't mean to hurt your feelings, but quite frankly, you can't cook and your housekeeping isn't any better. Like, those are true stories, because they don't make sense to me. The particles aren't cohesive. for me to actually see what it is that I'm cooking or that I'm cleaning, or I can walk by a window for 10 years and not realize there's a window there until somebody tells me there's a window there, and then I'm like, "Oh, there's a window." So I think that it's the same with the human body, of just seeing those particles and seeing how they begin to shift and understanding there's a movie playing at all times.
Oh,
And
yes.
so if a person says to me, "Well, I really think this and this and this," and the particles just write nope across their chest, or, nope across, up above their head, or, whatever it's going to say. It's just sometimes I just have to sit back and go, wow, okay. Because again, if they're not asking for help, it's none of my business.
Mhm.
Just because I can see it doesn't mean that it's any of my business. So I can be sitting with someone, who's 3 tables down, who's got uterine cancer, who doesn't know who's going to die within 7 days. It's none of my business. If I don't have the faith and the belief of their own journey as a soul, then I'm interfering in something that they're doing. If they need to know who I am, then they'll find out who I am, right? And they'll find me on their own. So I think that, looking at particles, looking at the DNA, looking at how much is being passed down or how much you're retaining in terms of your soul's growth. What is your soul here to learn? And that's not always fun sunshine stuff. Sometimes the soul is here to just really learn some hardcore stuff. And if you understand that there's no right or wrong, duality has to exist. We don't understand how good we can be until we understand how bad we can be. And our particles just take those into alignment. And so if we're needing to learn a lesson, then the soul manipulates. I don't know if I'd say manipulate, but it changes the particles so that you're going to have a reaction to what's taking place. In metaphysics and new age, we always talk about we're body, mind, spirit. Spirit being the most important, the mind being the next important because we're so brilliant, and the body is the temple that houses the two. I think of it totally differently. The spirit is the most important, but the second is the body, because it is the vehicle in which spirit speaks. And your mind is the least important because it allows you to go into ego. I can't, I'm not qualified, all of the things we tend to use our mind for. I think that it's just important to understand that how you're looking at your world, how you're looking at life. And we all have that, funny stuff that takes place that maybe we're not great at. Cooking, like I said, is not my main thing, but I don't see color. I mean, I could tell you something is green, and I could tell you something is brown or black, but I would never be able to tell you the shades of it. So as my sons moved into their teenage years, I adopted 2 more sons. And I'd come out to go do a radio show or a TV show, or, get ready to get on the road. And if I walked out of my bedroom and my 4 sons are sitting there going, "Oh, mama, you look beautiful," I know I match. And if I walk out the door and they say, "Oh, you look so pretty," I'm like, "I match. I match." And they're like, "You're not even close. You're not even close." And then, a 2-minute argument would ensue about who dressed me last time. And they'd take me back in and pick out an outfit for me. And I'd get dressed and, get their approval and leave the door or walk out the door. But it's all those particles. It's understanding that this chair that we're sitting in doesn't exist. It exists because we believe it exists. The same thing is true in disease. It exists because you believe it exists. First time I took my sons on an airplane, we're at cruising altitude, and I'm like, "Isn't this so cool that we're at 32,000 feet and this plane doesn't even exist? I mean, we're just kind of sitting here in particles." And they're just like, "Will you stop it?" But what makes it dense is the belief that it is. Does that make sense? There was an article that was written years ago about some of the Native Americans when when the ships started arriving, and men would come on shore, and they'd say, how could so many people be in this little boat, this little thing? And it wasn't until they understood that there was a big ship off the shore that they could actually see it. The reason they couldn't see it beforehand is because they didn't know it existed. It's like, wow, what is really there, what is really not there, according to the belief. And for me, I'm living proof of that, because if, like I said, if you give me something that I've never seen before, I have to feel it. I have to feel the edges of it. I have to feel the length of it. I have to feel the roundness of it. I have to feel it if I've never seen it before, because the particles don't come together to actually show me what it is that I'm holding.
Yes, and so when you touch it, your sense of touch gives you a more tangible expression of it or interpretation of it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that I can look at it and actually, and then from that point on, I'll see it.
Mhm, mhm.
Then I see what's taking place. But the way the particles, you'll see a density of particles, but you don't have a depth of particles. When you start looking through and you're working with particles, you don't have a depth perception. So my sons have always been, taking my hand, taking my arm, telling me there's a step, that there's a curb coming up, or there's a pothole somewhere. Because if I'm not paying attention, if I'm not looking down to see specifically what it is, then I don't know. And I think that when people understand that their disease process is taking the same shape and form, right? If they start thinking about what their disease looks like, or their doctors are showing the CAT scans, or they're, looking at, a tissue tear or something like that, that's what they get stuck in their mind. But if they understood that their mind was just as powerful of taking that tissue tear and mending it, seeing it healed, running their hand through it. It takes practice. It's not something all of us are just going to jump up and do, because, I will still go to the doctor occasionally and have my blood work done and just, make everybody happy, that, within the family. But it's also a validation for me that the particles in my body are okay. And you don't exist. You think you exist. You can take your hand and you can pat your leg, but you're just particles that are dense. That's it. You're just vibrating. If those particles got further away, then your leg wouldn't be there. That makes sense?
It does to me. I can track along with you. And so what's coming to me is we exist because we believe we exist. And the way that we believe we exist is the way that we exist.
Exactly. It's absolutely true. I teach that. I believe that when we came to this planet, we were still vibrational beings, and we began developing emotions. And those emotions began slowing down our vibrational speed, because we began having judgmental emotions, and we began fearing, and we developed jealousy and hatred and anger and so forth. And it slowed our frequency down to a point where we became mass. And once we became mass, then we felt like we had something to fear. And so, I think it really comes back around to, we exist because we believe that we exist in a physical form. But is that reality? And the reality for me is no. I mean, I will work with you because you have a belief that you exist and that you have an issue or whatever's taking place. But my job is to get those particles back in place so that they're all vibrating together, and so that you're not feeling like something is out of place, or that your fear is no longer consuming your body.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, so you must be able to see, like, I'm imagining kind of like electricity, like certain areas, maybe things don't line up or they're
It's more like on a grayscale.
mm,
It's a grayscale, and the best analogy is when you're watching television and the cable goes out and you get that snow. That's my world 24/7. So if I'm looking at a body, if I'm sitting here in Georgia and somebody is in Ireland, for me it's exactly the same as if they're sitting right here with me. And so I'm looking at what particles are moving, what particles aren't moving. I'm looking at what the particles actually write, because they'll create words. Or a doctor will say, I've got a patient and we think this is what's going on. And I'll say, no, it's the left front quadrant of the liver. And they're like, but none of the symptoms have anything to do with the liver. And I'm like, you asked me, I told you. And so doctors will say it'd be so much easier if you'd learn anatomy, symptomology, and physiology. And it's like, but that's for you. If I tell you there's abnormal cells in the left front quadrant of the liver, I expect you to be able to take it from that point on. But if I learn what you learn, then I'm going to second guess. If you're telling me that it's the location that you perceive the problem to be is over here on the right side of the body, but I see it up in the left shoulder, it doesn't have to make sense.
mhm,
That's where the storage goes. And what happens with the body when the particles get stuck and they're not moving and we're not listening, you know, your shoulders, perfect example.
mhm,
If we're not listening to the fact that our shoulders are starting to tighten up, and they're uncomfortable, but we're going to push through. Remember, there's an emotion
mhm,
that's making that shoulder stick. And if you don't pay enough attention, then the body just sends little tendrils down to another part of your body. Maybe it sends it into the gallbladder, and all of a sudden you start having gallbladder issues. And so somebody will come to me and say, I'm just having a horrible time with my gallbladder and it hurts so bad, and so on and so on. And I'm looking at that tendril going back up into the shoulder, and I'm like, not your gallbladder. The reason you're continuing to have issues with the gallbladder is because it's not the gallbladder, it's actually your shoulder. So let's work with the shoulder. And they'll go, how does that make sense? It makes sense because the origin, the core, was stored in the shoulder.
mhm,
The gallbladder was just a way to get your attention, to
mhm,
get you to look at the emotion.
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. And so uh, it's very beneficial then for Western and Eastern medical practices to merge and have you work with both of them or?
Absolutely. I actually work more with Western medicine than I do Eastern.
Mhm,
And I think the reason is this is, years and years and years ago, Western medicine would say, don't do supplements and all that stuff, it'll kill you. And then alternative medicine came along and said, don't do chemo, it'll kill you. And I think where Western medicine has come is that they understand they've got phenomenal technology. They've got phenomenal technology, but they understand there's a piece missing.
mhm,
So typically, if I'm working with someone who has cancer and the doctor's recommending chemo, I'm not going to say, don't do the chemo. I'm going to say, what do you feel comfortable doing? Because I can do a cellular cleansing at the same time you're doing a chemo. And you can be saying to your body, what color do I need to remove the excess chemo that my body doesn't need? And just remove it while you're receiving the chemo, and
mhm,
you don't lose your hair. That's a belief system. We've got all of these ingrained belief systems throughout the decades and centuries of what's going to happen if if A happens and we move to B. And it only exists because you believe that it's going to happen that way.
mhm,
And so, it's amazing when you watch someone who has been diagnosed with a stage 4 cancer and you start working on the emotion that created the cancer, and you start working through the different layers, and all of a sudden they're down to a stage 1, or maybe they're down to a stage 0, and they're hiking 4 miles a day, and they're out doing their life, and they're having a great time, and they're still doing chemo. And and once they understand that that doesn't have to be a negative, then it's good. I think alternative practitioners are finally starting to understand that there are times that our body needs Western. Um, and so, and each incident we have in our life is different. One time maybe it's just all Western. Maybe the next time it's all alternative and complementary medicine. It's really kind of paying attention. The one grandchild who is following me the most, that we're noticing the gifts are coming through the strongest with. I took him for lunch yesterday, and we got back home, and he pops on he's 7 years old. He popped on a yoga video and he started doing yoga. And I said, "Why are you doing yoga?" And he's like, "It just helps my digestion. I just feel better when I do yoga after I eat." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So, he's probably someone who will be more adaptive to complementary, because at 7, he's realizing already what his body needs.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. And listening to it.
And listening to it. Yeah. Yeah.
And so before there's a couple more questions I want to get to before we.
Okay.
And I want to ask that if the Conklin method of cellular cleansing was born from years of observing how people's bodies shift with their thoughts and words, does that mean only you can do it?
The difference is this, and the answer is no. Other people can do it. The difference is this: when I'm working with someone, because I'm specifically manipulating their particles, what they're dumping comes into my body, and I go through 48 hours of processing, just vomiting or diarrhea. And you look at it this way: it's if you prick your finger and you bleed, blood has to go somewhere. It's going to go on a towel, it's going to go on your clothes, it's going to go on the floor, it's going to go somewhere. And so when you're literally removing from the cells, you're not just doing energy work, you're literally taking from the cells. So for me, it's a 48-hour process in doing a 6-hour cellular cleansing. When my students do cellular cleansings, I always tell them every single one of us have gifts, whether we believe in it or not, we have gifts. My job as a teacher is to take your gift and accentuate it and help you understand how you're going to feel their body or see their body or hear their body. The difference is their client will experience flu-like symptoms for about 10 days. And so I have wonderful students. We have about 50 certified associates around the world. And so if they're working with someone who's critical, they typically don't take them on. They'll call me because they know that if they're going to work with them, they're going to make them more sick. And if they're already in critical condition, then they'll send them to me because I'll pull it out of the body. But everybody's got the ability to do it. I mean, I think the pulling out of the body, because everybody says, "Oh, don't you know you don't have to take that in?" It's like we're doing a totally different process than energy work, Reiki, energy medicine. All of those are incredibly valuable tools, but this is a totally different kind of process. But the students do it the same way. It's just their clients tend to take on more of the diarrhea, maybe some vomiting, flu-like symptoms, low-grade fever, so on, for 7 or 10 days. And then what we find is at the end of 6 months, they're exactly where they would have been if they'd worked with me. So it doesn't, the end result in that 6 months doesn't change.
Oh, it's been absolutely fascinating talking with you. How can we learn more about the vibrational medicine and the work you do?
You can go to patticonklin.com and it's PattiConklin.com. There's a YouTube channel. We have Binge Network. I'm going to be appearing on The Balancing Act, a Lifetime TV show. I think that'll be mid-January. But there's CDs. There's my book, God Within, God Within, The Day God's Train Stopped. And you can get that off of Amazon, or some of the CDs from the website or Amazon. But there's webinar classes that I teach in person and or by Zoom or Skype or whatever we're using at that point. We do energy adjustments every Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. And people can sign up for those and be anywhere in the world. And just, I do a half hour of color works, and my colleague Faye Henry does a half hour of gongs, and people can chat in. They're not on video, so they can just lay down wherever they're comfortable and listen to us and watch us. And then I do a healing league, which is an hour that people come on. One of the things that I'm slowing down on is doing half hour and hour long appointments. So we decided it'd be fun to do an 8-person healing league where people can talk about what issues they're having within their body, emotionally, physically, spiritually. And I'll talk to them about what color I want them to do. And then we do a half hour of color works with me pushing energy to each person to kind of change those particles around. Everybody gets homework. Nobody gets away without having homework. So they do their homework. But really just search Patti Conklin, and all sorts of different things will come up.
Oh, so inspiring, so meaningful. Would you like to talk about the free gift that you're offering today?
I think that Sandra, that's a good question. I think Sandra has put color works and or tone works.
Okay.
You know, the two active frequencies in the universe is color or tone. And so we have a ColorWorks CD or MP3 and a ToneWorks MP3. And I think she's made it available either one. So I'll make it available to either one. But if you're more of a person who likes to listen to tone versus having to go through the words of ColorWorks and visualizing color, then tone is a wonderful way to also move the particles in your body. And remember, you know, everyone can do this themselves. You know, you've just got to find what your emotion is that's blocking you, and understand that 2 years from now, it may be a different layer, it may be a different emotion. But start doing your homework. 10-15 minutes a day will really get you on your way.
Beautiful. I can also at the same time appreciate how working with you and going to deeper levels can really unlock parts of ourselves that may be locked up.
Yeah. I love my work. You know,
Yeah.
every day I never know what tomorrow's going to bring, and for me that's exciting.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to thank you so much for sharing your knowledge, your experience, and your beautiful, bright spirit with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being here, and just wish you many blessings.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to thank the audience for attending the Vibrant Life Summit today. And remember, tune in tomorrow as we welcome additional exciting guests, and have a wonder-filled evening or day wherever you are.